Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to a spiritual Lyceum night here from the Paul Christian Spiritualist Church in Poole in Dorset. We have got an absolutely wonderful speaker with us tonight, Mr. Leonard Tatt. Leonard, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for taking this evening for us and sharing your knowledge, your understanding with all of those people who'll be joining us tonight or later on Catch Up. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Welcome, my pleasure.
Leonard, I cheated a little bit and I find a biography of you today online.
Yep.
So I've been reading through that. So you were brought up in a religious environment from this biography, is that correct?
Yeah, my family were very Roman Catholic, so I mean that was especially important to my mother. So yeah, going to mass every week and a Catholic school and all that, very much.
Lovely. Did you find that religious experience at the young age is sort of like part of the fundamentals and the building blocks for when you started on your spiritual journey?
No. I mean, growing up for me, I didn't know anything else. That was, we were talking about this earlier. Growing up, God chose three things: your family, your religion, and your football team. I didn't think that there was absolutely anything else for me other than the family, the religious background that I'd been born into. So yeah, my parents would very much not have looked outside of Catholicism. Doing so would have, meant alienation for them from their religion. My father taught at a Catholic school, which was actually a Christian Brothers school, or the French version of that, which are called the De La Salle Brothers. And so he would have had employment problems as well if we looked outside. I actually, came into spiritualism after I'd had a very messy divorce, which actually was very difficult for my mother too. My parents were involved in a Catholic organisation called Marriage Encounter. So somebody in the family getting divorced wasn't just against the Catholic teaching. It was a failure, to her. And in those days, that sort of thing meant that you were outside the church in some way because you or perceived to be. It was very, very difficult to, bring the religion and that sort of thing together. I was then sent on a search because I, had a deeply spiritual interest. I started searching, everything. And funnily enough, around that time, bumped into somebody who was a spiritualist. I didn't know what the term was, didn't know what it meant or anything about it. And he started telling me everything, that I'd done and what my hopes, dreams and wishes were. And I got really hooked when I went for the first time to the Arthur Findlay College. Friends were going there, and out of curiosity, I thought, oh, well, I'll go along and have a look and see what happened. And this week was a week run by a lovely old Glasgow medium called Albert Best.
Oh, yeah.
And Albert was just exceptional. He was very renowned for giving names and addresses. Not just first names. He would give the names and the addresses and postcodes, and he put that down to having been a postman. But it was just absolutely exceptional. And I felt like I was, I'd come home. But the problem with that was that my mother felt like I was going to hell because of her Catholic belief. She couldn't understand what I was, now into. It took her years and years to, accept it. And then, of course, for me, that started my journey into spiritualism. But my journey's gone, full circle. So I was got very involved in spiritualism. But then, after being very involved in spiritualism, I started wanting to find out more about Catholicism once more. partly because I was a great reader of Carl Jung.
Right.
And Jung talks about how, he talks about the archetypes, but he also talks about how we each have a tradition and a base, a platform to build on, and that's the religion of our ancestors. And that it's very important to know about that religion and to, be aware of it. And the funny thing with it is that I then began to realize that I'd been taught my religion, or Catholicism, very, very badly.
Interesting.
So then set off on a process, of study. And I'm actually, a great believer in that we start to think of a religion more by the people that we meet and how they live out their religion. I mean, there's a very big difference between religion and spirituality. People can be religious. I brush my teeth religiously. There's nothing spiritual about that. That's a practical, everyday application that I have to do to live. Whereas spirituality is a realization that even when I haven't got teeth, I'll still be me. I'll still be, a living entity, and I have to live this life somehow to reflect that.
How interesting. You've really struck a chord here, because we've got a lovely lady, Joan from Philadelphia, who had the same upbringing as yourself in Catholicism. She just asked there, do you view spirit as the Holy Spirit with your Catholic upbringing?
The answer to that question is no. The Holy Spirit, if we looked at the whole essence behind the Trinity, as it's called in Catholicism, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, what used to be called the Holy Ghost. Basically, Augustine's teaching, I think, gets it very, very right, where he talks of mind, for, and expression. So the Holy Spirit would be breath. It's this wonderful Hebrew word, ruah. So the breath of God went and touched the waters and brought, order to the chaos. So the Holy Spirit is an expression of God. And it's, if you looked at that, in Buddhism, the belief in Buddhism that it is that every time we breathe, we say the word Om. Now, the word Om is the ancient creative name of God. So as we breathe, we are, crying God's name, which is our innermost desire, is to know God and live God and express God in everything that we are. It's the deepest longing of our heart to know God. And so the Holy Spirit is there expressing itself through our breath, but also coming back to us in the expressions that we are able to manifest in the world, whereas the spirit or holy, the spirit world rather is the dead people who, like me, have an essence of that breath, that divine spark, who have survived death and are living on in another dimension of existence. So,
wow.
So they are different, but the understanding of it, I think, helps us hugely, because we then realize how close God is to us, and that's what I mean about that misunderstanding in Catholicism. I grew up thinking God was an old man with a big white beard sitting on a cloud dispensing justice. I didn't believe that God was as close as my breath and that lived through me, through everything that I did. But that idea of building on the tradition of my ancestors helps me realize that not just the fact that I'm not just this person that was born at a particular time, at a particular place, to a particular family, but I'm everything that went before, and I'm also connected to everything that will come after. So I'm connected to the struggles, the spiritual understanding, and the spiritual life of those that went before. So if I live my life well, I can actually help them in the spirit world. That's why they come back. They've got a vested interest in our lives, so that through my endeavors to live out my spiritual life, I'm actually helping them too, who are involved from the spirit world, but I actually also make an atmosphere and a better platform, if you like, for those that come after me. My descendants, I'm a grandfather now, so my granddaughter and whoever will come after. And that realization, I think, is the essence of spirituality, that we're not just an individual. We are not islands. We are mainlands that are connected to all that ever was and all that ever will be through that breath, which is the Holy Spirit.
Wonderful. Excuse me. Absolutely wonderful. Joan's very appreciative of that. And that very thought, that very energy and essence that you brought forward there about our ancestors and also our progeny going forward is something that's had a real resurgence during this COVID time. There's been this real big public acknowledgement about our ancestry, about our lineage, and paying homage to that, and for the future generations as well. It's just sort of like taking us out of that mold of being, living one day at a time and not worrying about very little else.
Yep.
We seem to have got a Chelsea fan drifted into the room, so they can't be doing too well at their match tonight. So anyway,
a little while. There's Tim. Yeah.
So lovely. Tim's asking, say, good evening, lady. Not that it really matters, but because of your religious journey, would you now call yourself a Christian spiritualist? Spiritualist?
No, I'm one that doesn't like these labels and boxes. One of the things that I've grown to realize is that for me, spiritualism is a connection that actually links all the other religions. So, we find mediumship in every religion, from Buddhism, to the tribal religions, that there are even mystical experiences that are very dominant in Christianity, the likes of Meister Eckhart, Teresa of Avila, and absolutely great depth of and wealth of mediumship there. But the term, that Christian, even I think at times, I've moved away from that. For me, that individual expression of the spirit should encompass all, and we limit it in a way by saying I'm a Christian spiritualist or a Buddhist spiritualist or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
you can't limit spirit. You can't limit God. God is limitless.
Indeed. And it's come up on quite a few of our presentations. People have compared different factions of spiritualism against each other, almost pitted. And it's like, why? We've got one word in common: spiritualists. Doesn't matter about the other words around it. We are all spiritualists. And the sooner we get into that energy, I think the better.
There is that, realization that God comes to us in an individual way. So if we've got this platform or this link with our ancestors, that will determine to a certain extent how I experience God and the spirit world. So all of that you could liken to being a filter. Now, for me, if God is limitless and I realize that, I can see another aspect of God or another reflection of God in each individual person that I meet. And that's a wonderful realization that if God is in me, then he's in everything. And if God is expressing himself in everything, I've got to, open myself up to that wonderful encounter of expression and champion the difference. We're all different in all sorts of ways. And those differences are wonderful expressions of that great creative power that is God.
Yeah, thank you. And you know what? I just love this way of life. I've had a few issues going on in the back of my mind at the moment. Today, I just happened to pick up a book, a Zodiac book. And if I had actually said to this guy exactly what was going on in my mind, what I read answered it. And you there have also picked up and given that expression there. So I'm absolutely loving this.
Right.
So Tim's just acknowledging your answer there. Excuse me, I don't know where this has come from. Sue Townsend's just asking, so do you believe that spirit pervades everything, the earth and all inhabitants?
Absolutely. As it was saying, that whole idea of God being breath, that very essence of God is in everything that breathes. It's God that gives life. One thing that we know is everybody dies on an out breath. So that idea of the breath going back to God, or our spirit, journeying on, I think it is very, very important. But also, that idea of God being mind. So that aspect of, mind, thought, and breath, or inspiration. If God is mind, even at a molecular level, we can see mind active, because an atom is not a random chaos. It's a miniature universe that actually, in all sorts of ways, expresses mind in all its complexity, in all its diversity. So we can see, God in the universe, but you can also see God in the building block of the universe, which is the atom. So in mind and in breath, everything. So I always start a prayer for any service, the God in whom we live, move, and have our very being, because everything is God. It has to be.
Yeah, as science has advanced and electron microscopes, etc., the more we're cutting away. There was a segment of DNA was posted the other day, and the complexities of it was just awesome.
Absolutely.
And we're talking something here so small we can't even comprehend how small that is.
I was reading something the other day which really touches on this point, because all religions are about living in the now, living in this moment. And if you think of mediumship, the spirit world are always there, but sometimes when we choose to become aware of them through our own volition, we're making that moment come alive. We're opening ourselves up to something that's always there. So religion is about opening ourselves up to that current moment so that we can find reality. But that's exactly what science is about. Science is about opening ourselves up to this moment to find out what that reality is. So in essence, even science is a spirituality. And it might be a spirituality of reality, but in essence, it's trying to find out where God is in this moment, the right now.
Yeah, excellent. And again, very much of this time, the advent of these talks and discussions online across the world, many, many different tongues being spoken, but all going along with similar paths. And it is very much about looking as well where science and religion need to start meeting. And there are some very encouraging signs that scientists are actually looking for that sacred fifth element to make their equations work. So opening up to that. Some wonderful comments coming in. I did love that expression, death on the outbreath. That resonated with me as well. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Sam. So you yourself ended up as a tutor at the Arthur Findlay College, is that correct?
I did, around the same time as Tim. Tim and I used to be colleagues at
right.
college. Very much. And I mean, great place to work, but very, very demanding. But what I was aware of when I was working there was the fact that my journey had only just started. So in essence, I wasn't ready. That there were all sorts of things that I needed to learn. The main one of which was self-discipline. I also wanted to have an education. I mean, at the time, we used to have, and the college still does, would have professors and doctors and university lecturers. And at the time, I hadn't even done any A-levels. And so at times you could be a little bit, intimidated. We can put a great deal of demands on our mediums, rather than actually help them grow, develop, and become the medium that they were meant to be. It's like we seem to think that once somebody's got a message that they're the finished article. You're not. You've just begun. You know, your hard work starts when you get to the platform. And again, there are other stages to that which I needed to open myself up to. And life is a way of throwing curveballs at you. My journey took me to a place that I would have said sort of 2 or 3 years before it happened that I would not want to go in that direction, that it was not for me, that no way would I ever go down that road? And lo and behold, I went down it and followed where God took me.
I can completely relate to that. People kept saying to me here at Paul Church, "You'll be running this church one day." I go, "No, I bloody won't." And suddenly, I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're here. Let's see what happens."
That's that belief that the person that you give a job to is the person that doesn't want it. You know, I mean, when people are seeking their own, the jobs themselves, whatever it is, any position of responsibility, if somebody wants it too much, they're the last person that should have it. It's the people that do it because somehow there's a calling that they can't ignore. And that's the thing about mediumship, is God disturbs our mind and our hearts, and there's no way that we cannot follow, because we wouldn't be who we are if we didn't follow. It's that disturbance that makes us, spiritual.
Yeah, and it is just being open to touching back on what you're saying about living in the now, and just, if you've got that confidence, that faith, that understanding of trusting that, and not relying on other people validating your work, because you know that your work is exactly where you should be. And if people accept that, great. If they don't accept that, actually, great.
Well, I mean, for me, there's only one thing or one person that we should be, working spiritually for, and that's God. That's where we need to, to hear, the praise or get the love from. And that's where we should always be looking. It's very easy to be swayed by all sorts of, popularity.
Yeah.
But as mediums, we very much need to keep our feet on the ground. And that's one of the wonderful things about mediumship, is you can't be a medium on your own. You're not a medium on your own. You need to have another world and a power behind you that you can't control, much in the same way as none of us created ourselves, none of us gave us life. Mediumship comes from a power that's outside of ourselves, that wants to express itself through ourselves. Tim's asking if about philosophy being an expression of mediumship, and I think it very much is. I mean, philosophy is great in that philosophy sometimes is likened to, everybody at some point has said every opinion possible, and you can go out there and pick your, philosopher. But if you actually start investigating philosophy, there are some wonderful hooks that you can, pin your life on. And the philosophy of spirit is one of life and expression and creativity. And really, if God is love, then that love is a creative power. And that creative power is expressive. It fills every crack with living things. It fills every space with life and expression. And philosophy, or looking at that, should fill us with joy.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the benefits of this time of being online and out there very much and talking to people is bringing out that knowledge and the understanding, that in the mainstream, people's vision of a medium is somebody who stands on the platform doing the evidential mediumship. Yet mediumship is communing with the spirit world in no matter what way that will manifest in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. If God is love, wherever we see that love expressed, then that's a medium. That's mediumship. And that's the power that we're talking about that allows mediumship to happen, is that power of love. We can't will the dead to come and speak to us. You know, it's an expression of that love that comes through the power of God, and anywhere and any expression that love, manifests, that is mediumship. So for me, for instance, you watch a doctor working.
Yeah.
A doctor doing microsurgery, they'll tell you that they sometimes don't know how their hands can work in such a minute and detailed way, and it's like their hands aren't their own. That's mediumship. That's something that is bigger than them, working through them. And do they need to be aware of who it is for that to happen? Of course not. It's the expression of that love manifesting in the world that's important.
I'm loving this. Thank you. It is. Simon James and Brian Robertson were on the other night, and he recounted a beautiful tale about a chance encounter, and a person's mother in spirit came through and talking, and he just said, I didn't need to say who it was or the evidence. She was just telling me where she is so that I could help her in the here and now.
Yeah.
And I thought that is just such a refreshing change, to just know that you've got that spirit contact. You've got that evidential side of it, but there's no need to broadcast it. There's no need to bring it out saying description. It's just like, oh, okay, right. Just talking with you and being able to bring out where you are at this time and talk about it. And I just love that. Beautiful mediumship.
Yeah.
Lovely. Sue Townsend. So I think we just touched on this, but she's asking, do you feel there is a need for more philosophy to help people better understand the continuance of life after death?
Absolutely. Well, I'm fascinated by philosophy and by the philosophers. Some of, it takes your breath away when you read some of the philosophy that has found expression in the world, all of which have come through forms of mediumship. I'll just mention another form of, for me, a form of mediumship, or a way of, of getting into this. For instance, if I pick up and read a book, so I could pick up and read a book of Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, are the words of Arthur Conan Doyle in what it is that I'm writing? No, they're just symbols on a page. That's things that have been put together and have to somehow register in my mind to make meaning and to build an image. So where is the philosophy? So if I'm reading Arthur Conan Doyle, it's not the words on the page. They're somehow connecting to my mind, and in some way I'm connecting to the mind of Arthur Conan Doyle and his philosophy through those books on a page. Now, if that wasn't true, we wouldn't have libraries that are absolutely enormous, full of every philosopher that's that's ever lived and walked the earth, all of whom have some sort of expression of this mediumistic power working through them. Because if God finds us and wants to work through us, it's God who takes up these challenges that are in front of us, God who brings the philosophy and finds the expression, and God who's leading us to a greater understanding of who and what we are. So I can connect with all of these philosophers, like, for instance, if you pick up, Plato's Republic, or, whatever it might be, in some way, I'm connecting to this philosopher who lived 400 years before Christ, and finding out, and still that has relevance to my life now, which fascinates me. The life that he lived is totally different to ours, and yet I can read that book and be so fascinated by it. I'm not the same person when I put it down.
Yeah.
I'm changed by the experience.
Yes, so true. So true. as I said, this experience today of these things going through my mind, which are causing me trouble, and picking up the zodiac messages and just opening it at random, and there were like 3 paragraphs, and it was a direct response to where I am and how to handle it. And I'm just like, this is great. I love this.
Yeah. And that's that wonderful
awesome
thing. I mean, how many times do we have a book and for some reason we don't read it, and it's been on the shelf for 5 years, and all of a sudden you pick it up and you read it and you think that's so relevant to my life now. And you then realize why you hadn't read it for 5 years, because it wasn't relevant 5 years ago when you brought it. What was it that made me buy this book that I wouldn't have known where I was going to be in 5 years' time? I don't even know where I'm going to be tomorrow. So how can I know in 5 years' time, well, what's going to happen, and buy a book that's going to be so relevant to my, to my life? Because that spirit that's connected to that divine power, which is God, knows where it wants to lead me. But the problem with that is, if it knows where it wants to lead me, why does it always lead me into these difficult parts of my life and these challenges and obstacles? Why does it keep leading me into these situations which I wouldn't choose?
Yeah.
Because it's got a higher purpose. It's finding an expression, and those are the words of Wordsworth, isn't it? That we're guided by powers that we do not know and do not understand. And that power is our spirit, which is connected to that God power.
Indeed. And, when we do find these situations in life, or people in our life, which is normally the case, a very good way I find of handling it is, what are you trying to teach me? Instead of putting out there rallying against it, just bring it in and just say, okay, what are you trying to teach me? Why am I here? Why are you in my life? Why are you in my path at this time?
And that's even more true of the people that rub us up the wrong way.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a belief in, at the moment I'm studying, I've done a counselling course, but at the moment I'm doing starting an MA in psychosynthesis. But the belief is that whatever we see in other people that rubs us up the wrong way is in us, but we're not ready to accept it yet. I mean, we know that to a certain extent. You hear people talk about others, oh, they're a gossip, and you think, yeah, but so are you. We do it all the time. That's why it's incumbent upon us to look for the best in others, because then we're finding the best in ourselves. That's that mirror. And if you think of mediumship or our psychic senses, what we're doing, in psychism is we're being a mirror for somebody so that they can see themselves better, reflected back, so that they realize they have more choices and more options in life, that they can actually rise above whatever circumstance they're in, and thereby be what they were meant to be, which is why the psychic, has its place in our movement, just like, the mediumship does.
Yeah, I agree there totally. So Tim's back. Lenny, one of the great debates I've had over the years with different mediums, and I have my own opinion on this, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Is God and the spirit world one and the same thing?
It's a very difficult question to answer, because it leads us to that question, what is God? And if it's God in whom we live, move, and have our very being, then God is the spirit world. And yet there's a level of mind or divinity or perfection, if we like, that is also further on than that. So my journey, or my spiritual journey, ever keeps pace with my understanding of God. But always there's this place of mystery between what we understand now and that idea of perfection, or the idea of what God is. It's actually depicted on that, the drawing on the Sistine Chapel, where you've got, the hand of Adam and the hand of God, and there's a little gap between them. And that gap is mystery, those parts of life that we don't understand. So God is the spirit world, but God is also other than the spirit world, more perfect, more pure, more loving, and all of those, transcendence that we are aiming at. one of the other ways of understanding this, is like time. We're in this time conscious universe, but by the time we actually reach God and are able to dwell with God for eternity, there is no time. We can't understand the concept of there being no time because we live in a time conscious universe.
Yeah.
And it's that which really different, is the difference between God and the spirit world. Yes, God is the spirit world, but at the same time, he's beyond that. He's more pure than that. He's even being tried to reach by those who are in the spirit world. So they're still journeying towards, and Silver Birch is very good with this, where he talks about, the realms and those circles that are above our circles that reach higher and higher up through the realms of spirit until they reach, perfection. You also find this a lot in Andrew Jackson Davis, who talks about those seven spheres, which we can find in all sorts of ways, indications of that in the Bible or, ancient Hindu philosophies too.
Yeah, brilliant answer.
Difficult question to answer because it's one of those awful yes and no answers.
Yeah. It's one of those things, it's an unfathomable depth. So how can you ever plumb that depth?
And that's that stuff of Meister Eckhart, that we only know God from what God is not. So we know God is not violence. We know God is not time. We know God is not, condition. We know God is not dogma. So we can only know God from what he is not. But because of that, what we tend to do is we tend to limit that God. We tend to limit the sublime coming into the world because we can't understand or even, contemplate what that pure love really is.
Yeah, very true. Steve Ebbitt's got quite a technical question here. In your opinion, can creationism and Darwin's evolution both be true? If so, how? Just wondering about your views about how mankind came to be here, considering Homo sapiens have only been around for 200,000 years in the 4 billion years timescale of life on Earth. Thank you, Steve.
Again, some very difficult questions to answer here. The popular view of creationism is of course the biblical view, which would also believe that the world is flat and that it was created in 6 days, and on the 7th day, we need to get away from that because that is allegory, and it's basically an indication, to an eternal truth. The best way that I've understood it, I believe that God created the world, and I can't remember whether this is Neil Donald Walsh and that Conversations with God, but the whole idea that God as a purity could not experience himself as a purity, so had to create the opposite so that he could create, like for instance, the best way of understanding this is that sometimes you don't realize how much love means to you until you lose it. Yeah. So we lose somebody that we love and we realize what a benefit they've been in our lives. So it's this idea that God created a space so that he could experience himself, and that space is the opposite. So basically, we're then trying to journey or to experience so that we can then become who and what we really are. In other words, life is about becoming fully and truly human. And we know that to a certain extent because, we'll talk about violence being inhuman or inhumane. But there are all sorts of ways of being inhumane or inhuman. We've got to basically, as spiritual beings, learn what good and evil is so that we might choose the good. Yeah. Which is basically, again, Darwin's theory of evolution. So they do exist alongside each other, and I think that they help us understand what you know, what God is, or what the purpose of life is, but we can't. And I'm always brought back to that. There's a wonderful, in the Passion drama of Jesus, there's a wonderful question that Pontius Pilate says, truth, what is truth? Because we've got this idea that truth is just black and white, that there is a truth and there's nothing else. But there's actually a hierarchy of truths. You know, because something is true, it doesn't make something else false. It just is a different perspective, or a different, you know, view, you know, of things, which help us grow in our understanding of who and what we are in relation to God. So in theory, we're gods in the making. If we're gods in the making, that makes us stewards, you know, of creation. And by stewards, I mean we've got to look after creation, you know, in a way that reflects that divinity which is inherent in all of creation, so that all of creation might be spiritualized. That's why I like the work of Teilhard de Chardin, who actually, he talks about this omega point. So he takes on Darwin's theory, you know, the theory of creation. He takes on this theory a little bit more, saying that all of creation, you know, is increasing in spirituality or its vibration, so that it might be with God. And that's that idea that when we're spiritualized, all colors will beat as one, and we'll know that we are all connected.
Ah, awesome.
I hope that answers the question a little bit. There's lots of people that write on this. Teilhard de Chardin is, you know, is fascinating, but he's this figure who was ostracized by the church because of his comments. But basically, you know, he's talking about how, you know, heaven is here in creation, that we're creating heaven. And we know that as spiritualists because, like, for instance, I mean, if I get to the spirit world, it'd be great to get to the spirit world and meet my mother and father and all those that I love. But that's not heaven, because those that I've left behind are not there yet. So then I'll meet them and heaven will be more complete because my son and granddaughter in time will get there. But that's still not heaven because the ones that they love aren't there. And if somebody I love is somehow diminished by not being present with somebody that they love, then that can't be heaven. Heaven can only be a place where there's no death, but there's also no suffering and no pain and no war and no violence. So we're all at peace, realizing we're all a piece of the creation of God that needs each other. So you know we're making heaven, you know, through our spirituality.
What you've just said there, you could actually go away now and spend the next couple of years contemplating about all aspects of heaven. That I have never heard it put that way, and it makes perfect sense.
But if you think about, that's why our mediumship at its best is emanating a peace that actually touches everybody that we come into contact with. That is what the essence of our mediumship, that we were talking of earlier, that you don't even need, you know, this evidence of, I've got your grandmother here, she was 5'4", whatever it is, you know, it's this emanating a peace. So when the spirit world come, you find this, you know, very much with trance mediumship, there's a feeling and a presence that's tangible, that touches your heart and your soul without a doubt. Before even communication comes, you know that you're in the presence of something bigger than yourself, something more complete than yourself, something that touches the very essence of your being. So we get a foretaste of this now through our mediumship, but it will be even more than that when actually heaven is created. And where will heaven be? It will be here. The earth will be, you know, will be the heaven. And then we'll hear people talk about, you know, well, this universe will only last 8 billion years or whatever it is. But that's because in that mystery that we were talking about, that gap between us and God, there are states of existence or expression that we don't even understand yet.
Yeah.
But God does.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to let God be God and go on our journey to, find that expression that he's chosen for us.
Yeah.
What expression is he chosen for me? And sometimes it can be quite difficult, but it's, it's very, very important that we find out. But often we find out through our mistakes, don't we?
Yes. Well, and these are the greatest lessons in life. And I always say, people sometimes wish they knew the answer to whatever they were embarking on, or were 5 years ahead of where they are now. But it's not. That's not the point. It's the journey getting there. That is where we learn. That's where we evolve. That's where things will change.
And in fact, all we have is the journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
it goes on.
What we have is the journey.
Very true, very true. And I loved you touched on there an area. I got involved in a debate on reincarnation last night. I accidentally wandered into the wrong room, but but I just put forward a premise which probably didn't go down too well. When everybody was talking about reincarnation, I said, why is reincarnation only of this world? Why is it not of other worlds? We're talking to spirit in another dimension. So,
but I actually love the ideas of reincarnation of St. Francis of Assisi, because what St. Francis talked about is he talked about each day being in miniature our life. So we're incarnated of a morning, we live throughout the day, we die at night, and what happens in the morning? We're reincarnated. But I'm reincarnated back as me, and I get to do the same as what I've done through my incarnation, but I can choose to make this day different. But what we tend to do is we bring with us all the doubts, fears, all the problems and challenges and obstacles of yesterday into that new reincarnation. And this is the problem that I have at times with reincarnation. But people talk about it as if it overcomes all of their problems, and it doesn't. What it does, we bring our problems with us, and we have this opportunity in this life when we're reincarnated every morning to choose today to be the best possible spiritual person that I can be.
Yep.
And I just think it's, because that's that old, state, because when we're reincarnated, it's the same as past life. If you went back in my past life, I'd want to be some king or some, instead of this little person who's struggling and striving and, always failing and having to pick himself up. We want to be somebody that was, miraculous somehow. Life is a miracle. Waking up, and this is the same with death. And the whole purpose of spiritualism. Well, we get these times where part of our lives will die in this life, and we have to be ready for it to reshape itself or reconstitute itself in some way. Death's exactly the same. When we go to sleep, we don't worry about where we're going to wake up. And that's the purpose of spiritualism, is to help us realize that we will wake up somewhere, somehow, even after that last sleep, which is called death. That's fascinating for me.
It is. It's hugely fascinating. You are putting forward thoughts and ideas not very often heard, and I can tell by everybody's reaction, and including my own, it is greatly appreciated. Absolutely. Tim is still here, although he's probably sat there with his scarf on now and his rattle out ready.
10 minutes till kick off.
So it is confirming what you're saying there about feeling that presence.
Which is healing. I mean, what he's talking about there, that's healing. That's why, when we're healing, we don't say anything. We're trying to manifest this presence that Tim's talking about in a tangible way. Now, our ability to manifest it, of course, will be filtered by our resistance. And our resistance is our lack of spirituality, our lack of attunement with the spirit world. Whatever it is, our doubts and fears and, all of that is a resistance to that power manifesting its healing presence in our lives. But that's what healing is trying to do, is manifest the power of God so that somebody can walk as the creature that God created us to be.
Yeah, yeah, I echo that sentiment. I find everything in spiritualism has its fundamental roots in healing. Everything.
All of mediumship is healing. Everything.
Exactly.
Given a message from the platform is healing, not just for us. Pardon me. There's a benefit for those in the spirit world through us giving a message to their loved one who they're unable to speak to now. In other words, we embody them. We give a body to them. And that body, then they're able to express through. That's healing for them.
Yeah, hugely. And I've said that time and time again here at Paul. You know, imagine two friends who just have a Barney. You know, it happens, doesn't it? We all have a little tiff. Walked away, both stood on their own mountains, not talking to the other one, and one passes over. How healing and cathartic is that if that one could come back and just say, do you know what? I was really sorry. You know, it happened, and accept my apology. That is so much healing for the spirit world, as well as that person receiving.
And that's that comment about expression, because, you know, we forget that in the spirit world, they have fears and desires and doubts and needs and wants and all of the other, you know, conditions of the human spirit that make us human.
Yeah.
They're still there, even when people have died. They have to be, otherwise there'd be death.
Yeah. Is it in the Bible, where the tree falleth, there it shall lay? It's so true, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so enjoying this tonight. Just a quick farewell note there before Tim gets a can of beer out and starts shouting obscenities at the TV. Have a lovely evening, Tim. Absolutely awesome. You've taken a lot of your work abroad as well, haven't you? To the States, Canada, Switzerland, the Shetland Islands. How did that come about? Lovely.
Oh yeah, it's a lovely place to be. I was invited and went to work there. They have a spiritualist church at Lerwick. Run by a beautiful woman who has dedicated her life to bringing that there.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Do you find different geographical areas you either gel or meld to, or some areas you find difficult to sort of like exist in for a while?
Everywhere is something to. I mean, I'm excited by travel. I believe that it broadens the mind and the soul, and that. You know, at times you've got to actually be somewhere for a little while to understand the culture, to understand the way of life. So everywhere has something to offer. I mean, I'm fascinated, you know, by history and religion and the way that the human condition finds to express itself. That sometimes when you're working mediumistically can, create challenges. So you might have to adapt to wherever you're working. But the spirit world are always there, and you can always work.
Yeah, indeed.
And that challenge at times can be very. It can be a great opportunity for growth and for investigation and for, and again for expression. To meet wherever you are. The spirit world never ever lets down. Sometimes we might have to work a little bit harder to find out what they're trying to do, but that can be fun.
Yeah, very true. Because you lived in Rome for a number of years as well.
I lived in Rome for 4 years. So, I mean, I loved living in Italy. The Italians have a great culture and spirit, which I got very, steeped in. And being, that close, I lived on what was extra Vatican territory, but we used to, have access to all parts of the Vatican City and, these ancient churches, because they're a monument. For me, churches are a monument for our desire for this transcendent experience, for our need for, we often at our very core know that this world is not the way it's meant to be. And for me, churches are an expression of the human need to overcome whatever circumstances, we find ourselves in. It's why you find some of the most ornate churches in some of the poorest countries, because people are dedicating themselves, to this God who they want to find and find through their creative endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can go into a church and find all sorts of things, and also at times, I mean, I love sitting in churches when there's no one there. Just that feeling of peace that that can come over you is palpable.
Yeah, because you mentioned earlier about psychism, and what I always say to people: first thing you do whenever you walk in a church, be it a small little church somewhere or the greatest cathedral, everybody goes quiet.
Yeah,
it's just that energy the minute you walk through that door, because that place has been dedicated to prayer of help, of despair, of joy, upliftment, ceremonies, celebrating or commiserating.
Yep.
And it's all imbued into that one space.
Yeah, and I'm a great believer that prayer is something that perfumes the air. It can change the essence of a building. Prayer basically is spiritual exercise. People often think prayer is something that, and it's strange. With my background, there are often, in Christianity, this idea that if I pray for something to God, He will give me it, whatever it is, from the lottery numbers to great riches. But what actually happens with prayer changes me to meet the circumstance that I encounter. So, somebody that I love might be ill. If I pray, I'm not going to, make that person better, but I might change me so that I can meet the circumstances that I'm encountering in a way that helps that person in whatever circumstance they find themselves in. So prayer changes me. And it directionalizes the mind so that, the mind concentrates on what's important. So we'll find this whether you're doing affirmations or hypnosis or whatever it might be, mantras, or we're using repetitive words and symbols so that the mind can concentrate on what's important, and that's why we pray, because I can't change anybody else. I can't change how anybody else thinks, feels, what they do, but I can change me.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways that I change me is through prayer.
Definitely. We have a development circle here in the church, and one night we were working on the power of prayer. So everybody was taking, because prayer's sometimes one of the hardest things to get out of people, because it becomes such a personal thing that they don't have that confidence to share. But we were working in that energy of, standing up and delivering your prayer from the heart, bring it out. Yeah. And we had a Brazilian lady sat with us, lovely lady. And she started doing the prayer. She was quite adept at it, but you could just hear that, that translation mechanism going on. So I said, say it in your language. She went, you won't understand me. I said, trust me, say it in your language.
You will.
And everybody got it.
Yeah.
And I went, thank you. That is the power of prayer.
Yeah. That
absolutely was an energy came into this space, and it was just like, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah. And it's something that connects us. I mean, when somebody prays, there's some sort of connection that you can feel when you're in their presence.
Yeah.
If somebody's praying properly, and it's that whole idea that it's God praying through us. So if you really allow prayer to find this expression, God finds the words in you and uses them to reach other people.
Yeah.
And that's mediumship.
Indeed, which is healing.
Yeah, which is healing. Yeah, there's a theme emerging.
Yeah, definitely. Leonard, I just can't thank you enough for tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
If we may, at a future date, revisit you again, because you have just got so much to share.
Yeah, no, that'd be good. But, I mean, next time, maybe from some of the things we've talked about, this evening, you might, want to hone down on something, particular. We can develop one of the themes that we've discussed. Whatever you want to do, it'd be great to come again.
And I know everybody has been riveted tonight, and I do love that phrase: "Prayer perfumes the air." That's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Brilliant night.
Thank you everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, they've all enjoyed it. We've got America on, Scotland, UK, Denmark, Sweden as well. So yeah, and everybody has said the same. So much to think about.
Good.
Don't forget, everybody, this will be available to rewatch either on the church Facebook page or our YouTube channel. And I will also make this into a podcast for anybody if you want to download it on your phone and listen to it later on. Podcasts are really nice because you just listen to it. You're not having to sit there watch anything, and actually I find it goes in a lot better. Leonard, I can't thank you enough.
Oh, you're welcome.
Beautiful evening.
You're welcome. Thank you for the time.
Wow, thank you. Next Saturday, ladies and gents, we have a gentleman called Andy on, and he helps run the team who run the Veterans Hub, which is down in Weymouth, which is about 40 miles from Poole. Absolutely outstanding organisation. They help active and retired service men and women in all fields where they need assistance, including holistic treatments, housing, you name it, they will step in there and help. And obviously, there is an awful lot of work going on the mental welfare for these boys and girls coming out and trying to cope with things. Brilliant charity, do so much work. It just worked out. The only date Andy was available was the 5th of June, which is obviously the eve of the D-Day Remembrance Day as well. So it's just tied in very nicely. Really looking forward to hearing Andy and his story of how this charity got set up, where they are now, especially coming out of the COVID era, and what's lined up for the future. So, but back to tonight's guest, Leonard. So indebted. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Good night.
Good night, everybody. You can tune in now and watch Chelsea lose 2-1. All right.